You will know already about this, so I'll try not to bore you too much, but there's some interesting points. If you're not so aware of Athena SWAN and good practice, I would urge you to take this back to your departments and tell other people about it, because it's quite important. Okay, so the kind of motivating question, which I think is on a lot of people's minds, and possibly not so today, because my first question was, where are the women? And they're obviously all here, which is great. But you may have observed that that's not quite the same in your home department, where there probably are quite a lot of female undergraduates. There may be quite a few female PhD students. There probably are some female lecturers, but there are not many as you go further up the tree. So in particular, in the UK, we have about 42% of undergraduates are girls, which is great. But only about 7% of professors. That's slightly up on the figure that we have in our good practice award. This is the latest figures. It was 6% last year, and this is 7%, which is good. That represents about 50 to 55 actual women who are female professors of maths in the UK. Well, why should that matter? Maybe that's just life, and we should just accept it. I don't think so, and I think a lot of other people agree. The drop-off is particularly severe in mathematics. If you compare it with other science subjects where you might think there would be a similar profile, for example, in physics, chemistry, to some extent in engineering, of where there's even worse a problem, I guess you could say. But the point in mathematics is a very severe drop-off. We've got lots of female undergraduates and very few female professors. You could say, well, that's just life. 30 years ago, there weren't many female undergraduates, and that's what we're seeing now. That's not the case either, and the data that we produced in the report I'll mention in a minute illustrates that quite well. The other thing I find very interesting is that this data isn't typical across the world. It happens to be the case in the UK. If you look at other countries, quite a different picture. So there are plenty of countries where there are lots of female faculty staff in universities. There doesn't seem to be such an issue. So it's nothing to do with our brains. It's not that we can't do mathematics. There's something in the culture that we need to do something about. Everybody needs to do something about, and that's really the point of the good practice stuff that I'm talking about. In 2010, there was an international review of mathematics and statistics. I always get that title wrong. And it recognised this particular issue. So the international review were international mathematicians who came and looked at the UK scene. It was funded by the EPSRC, very large review of what's going on in mathematics. But something they picked out on particularly was that there were very few women. They went round to many, many departments, met lots of mathematicians, hardly any women. So they in particular recommended that some urgent action be taken. And what we've been doing with the LMS, amongst many other initiatives, such as running days like today and the Mary Cartwright Lecture, is to look at how we can look at formal processes that happen within departments and culture in universities and see whether the actions that we can take to improve those. That's got to be one of the steps that we need to take. Okay, so the point of what I'm talking about here, the Athena SWAN project and the good practice scheme in the LMS, it's all about trying to improve practice in UK maths departments. This is a very formal kind of way of looking at things, but equally it's still an important thing to do. The main strapline, really, I think is very important to take away, is that good practice benefits everybody. It's not just about special measures for women. It's good for everybody. We have good practice. So if you don't exclude groups of your academic staff from things, that's good for everybody. Bad practice affects women disproportionately. So if you have a department that doesn't encourage people to go to promotion, that doesn't sort of recognise good quality about people, that doesn't spread out the admin's tasks around all sorts of people, then some people will still manage to get promoted in that kind of culture. Some people will not. And guess what? It's often the women who don't get as well promoted as the men. So Athena SWAN, which has been going for roughly 10 years, I think, is a national scheme that was set up by the Royal Society, amongst others. It's now run by the Equality Challenge Unit, which is a non-governmental organisation, a not-for-profit body that runs the Athena SWAN system. It's an award system that recognises and rewards good practice in university STEM departments. So for science, technology, engineering and maths, you could apply as a department to have one of these awards. And I'll mention a bit more about that in a minute. That's a very good scheme, and we're talking about how to encourage departments to participate in that. Very recently, January this year, the Research Councils UK, which is the umbrella body of all the research councils, put out a statement about equality and diversity, which has really helped with getting universities to engage with the Athena SWAN scheme and with general good practice, which, again, to paraphrase it slightly, essentially says that the research councils will be looking to see that departments have very strong evidence that they're looking at equality and diversity issues within their departments. If they're not doing that, then their research council funding is at risk. So if you apply for a research grant and your university doesn't seem to be doing anything to do with equality and diversity, you're going to be at disadvantage. And that's where you hit people where it really matters. So, okay, I think probably we all buy into the idea that good practice is a good thing and that departments should be recognising it. There are some people who think it's less important. Now they have to take it seriously, because if they're not seen to be doing something, they will suffer in terms of getting research council funding. Oh. What do you think? Okay, so just wanted to give a kind of what am I talking about with this good practice, the phrase I keep throwing around. There are kind of 5 principles that we think are important, which departments should be giving to everybody. So the first of all is equality of opportunity. We should all have the opportunity, say, to go for promotion, to get certain research grants, to have a PhD student, do certain kind of responsibilities within the department, so to be on the research committee as well as the teaching committee, for example. Departments ought to have fair appointment, selection and promotion policies. Often these are the most well-developed in most universities. Most HR departments will not allow you to have an appointments panel with no women on the panel. However, that's the case for academic staff. For many of us here today, I actually think that the PhD to postdoc level might be important, and many, many universities still interview postdocs without any regard for appointment panel structure. So you will often get an all-male panel looking at postdocs and deciding whether to appoint them or not, and that's not regulated. Department structures ought to give fair access to progression. So if getting your next level of job relies on you having done certain kinds of things in your department and nobody ever gave you the chance to do those kind of things, you're at a bit of a disadvantage. We ought to have fair opportunity for that. We ought to have an open, inclusive culture in the department. So I've certainly been in departments where the seminars were regularly at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, professorial lectures 6 o'clock. Well, that's hopeless for me. I've got 2 kids. I don't want to be in the university at 6 o'clock every Friday. I need to be at home. So that's not a particularly open and fair culture. Other examples are, giving you teaching responsibilities that are particularly restrictive in your working life. So, for example, teaching in the evenings. And fifthly, flexible working practices that enable all staff to maximise their contribution to mathematics. Really what it's all about is getting better mathematics. We're not talking about special measures that benefit a particular group of people. We're talking about improving mathematics. That's what should motivate universities and departments to get involved in good practice. We want to do good work, good science, good mathematics. How can we enable people to do that? So, for example, if you've taken time off, for example, from maternity leave, and you come back to your department and suddenly you have to do all the teaching that you weren't doing for those 6 to 9 months, and it's all thrust into one semester, that's not a very flexible working practice. We want to have a better way of getting people back into the work, getting back into their maths research when they come back from maternity leave. And other examples of that nature. Okay, so a little bit about Athena SWAN, if you haven't come across it. Athena SWAN is this national scheme. It offers bronze, silver and gold level awards, recognising good practice that support women in science. There's now, I think, a further policy they're talking about widening it out across all departments, so not just about science, but it's come from the science in the first place. There are 2 kinds of awards that a particular university can have. They can have a university-wide award, and a university must hold a bronze Athena SWAN award before any departments can do anything. And then the department itself can apply for the different kinds of awards. So the university must have a bronze award, and many, many universities do have a bronze award or are applying for it. You can go back and check whether your university has applied for Athena SWAN Bronze Award. This involves essentially showing that they've thought about gender, they've thought about quality issues, they've got policies in place, they're moving in the right direction. Then the department itself can apply for an award. Many university departments are applying for bronze awards at the moment. Again, I do encourage you to go back and see if your department is doing that. In order to get one of these awards, it's quite a complicated process. Peter's been on the judging panel recently, can no doubt tell anybody who wants to get more information about that. But essentially, you collect data, you collect information about the policies that are going on in the department. You actually have to discuss it with a group of people. It's not just one person who's put together this information. So the department needs what's called a self-assessment team, which is a group of people at all levels, from PhD student, possibly even undergraduate, up to professor, who sit around and think about whether these policies are really being applied. Is it all on paper and not in practice? They're really interested in knowing whether this is a genuine attempt to address the issues or just a paper exercise. The data is not enough on its own. You also have to have an action plan. So your department, and certainly your university, would have to have an action plan of things that you've noticed. You've looked at the data and you're saying, oh, we've got lots of female undergraduates, but there's a sudden drop-off at PhD student level. Why are our undergraduates not carrying on to do PhD? That, for example, you might want to address. Eugenie was talking earlier on about doing a survey of her undergraduates at her university, see what were their intentions about doing further study. Can we get at what are the reasons why they're not staying with us to do a PhD? So you've got to have an action plan. And then once you've achieved one of these awards, it doesn't mean that you can now sort of go away and not worry about it anymore. There's monitoring every 3 years to make sure that you're keeping up, following up your action plan, moving forward. And as I said, it's coordinated by the Quality Challenge Unit, which have branches in London and Edinburgh. 2 essential points. I'm sure there's more than 2, but 2 that I really wanted to pull out, and one I've said already, but as you can tell, it's a message I really want people to take away. Athena SWAN in particular emphasises that good practice is good for everybody. So sometimes you go back and talk about Athena SWAN and people who are on the self-assessment team, which should also consist of men and women, by the way. It should be a mixed group. There can be this feeling that, well, it's the women trying to get special treatment. It's not about that. It's good for everybody. So that's a really important thing to say. And the second, which I think is extremely important, is that the work involved in going for this Athena SWAN Award should not be falling on a junior woman's shoulders in the department. I've seen examples where the department self-assessment team essentially falls to the A lecturer or a senior lecturer in the department whose job is to make this thing happen. That's not what it's about. It's about engaging the whole department and saying, we need to change our culture and move it. So if that's you, if you're the junior woman who's having to do the Athena SWAN thing, or you know somebody who's doing that, it's really important that isn't the case, and you need to speak out. Okay, so just want to talk now about the London Mathematical Society's Good Practice Scheme, which is complementary to Athena SWAN. So Athena SWAN is this big national scheme. The London Mathematical Society sees it as a good thing and wants to help departments to move towards Athena SWAN registration, and so has undertaken a series of different measures, and I'm just going to mention a few of them. First of all, we have the ability for departments to become supporters of the Good Practice Scheme. It's about 25 departments so far. You can check the LMS website to see if your department is on the list. It doesn't take a great deal. Your department head just has to write into the LMS and say, yes, we're committed to the principles of good practice, and then gets involved in various workshops and things. Second thing that we do, we've run a bunch of networking workshops. The next one is on Monday in Edinburgh, where we're trying to help, in particular, those people involved in this Athena SWAN process to get together as a group, share examples of good practice, find out how other people have done it. We bring in people who've already gone through the process and talk about what worked well and what didn't work well. There's a website the LMS has on its main website. You can find the website for Women in Maths and the support, Good Practice Scheme supporters website, which contains successful Athena SWAN applications. So if you want to see what does a good one look like, you can look at it there. Examples of good policy documents that various universities have written, for example, on policy on return from maternity leave, and slides from the workshops that we've held in the past, possibly some video presentations as well coming. And last but certainly not least, something we've done very recently is to publish a report with benchmarking data and examples of good practice which were taken from across the country, 30 university departments that participate in the survey. So just to mention that a bit more, you should have a copy in front of you to take away, or you can download it. If you don't want to carry it with you, you can get the PDF from the website. This benchmarking report was something that we commissioned with the LMS, was launched at the House of Commons last month, 2 months ago, in February. It was produced by an independent consultant who has access to all the HESA data, so Higher Education Statistics Agency collects data from all over the country about, well, many, many things, but certainly it collects information on gender and university students and staff. And so we've done an analysis of all the data in HESA about how many undergraduates there are in maths, how many PhD students, lecturers, senior lecturers, and so on, by gender and by domicile. So we were very interested in whether there were UK students carrying on to do a PhD or whether it was mainly students from overseas, which is of course a good thing, but it's slightly worrying if there aren't many UK students staying on. 30 departments filled in a very comprehensive survey. If you were involved in doing the survey, I can only apologise because it was a pretty onerous thing to do. I did it myself with my department, and we did pull our hair out over it. But it was well worth doing because we've managed to pull that information together with a whole series of examples of good practice that is going on in UK maths departments, which hopefully you can share from that. And each department that filled in a report, a survey, gets its own, and has got just recently, its own report of how they compare with the national picture, which certainly I can say for my department, we're going through the Athena SWAN process at the moment. It's incredibly useful. We've done the questionnaire. We know where we now stand against the national picture, and that's going to help us with our action planning about what things we could be doing. It gives you concrete ideas of what culture change you could make to improve things. Okay, that's obviously not the end of the story. There's lots more to do. The LMS has a Women in Maths committee, and we're continuing to do a lot of work in this particular area. One of the things that we'll obviously be looking at is monitoring the success rate of maths departments getting Athena SWAN awards. At the moment, I think there are 4. Great. 4, that's the latest news, is it? There's been some recent panels. There are 4 UK maths departments that have achieved Athena SWAN awards. That's not very many out of the total number of UK maths departments. So we would like to see that improving. We're hoping that our networking workshops will help that to some extent. We're looking at doing further surveys and data collection. One interesting idea we've been talking about earlier on is mapping the proportion of women at different universities. So, okay, we've got the overall picture. How many undergraduates are there? How many postgraduates, senior lecturers and professors? But is that a uniform picture, or are there some universities where there's a very different picture? And we should be able to get that data. In fact, we have got that HESA data, and it's a case of analysing it. So that would be interesting to do. Another idea for a survey, we can get a bit fed up with surveys, but they are useful, is to actually talk to individual women and find out more about their own experience. And of course, sharing good practice is very important. Sometimes that sounds like a trivial thing to do, but it is so useful to find out what somebody else has been doing that's made a difference. If you know that some measure has been taken and that really helped a group of women in a department, then it's something that you could think about doing too, or encouraging your head of department to taking on board. Okay, I think that's the end of what I was going to say. 2 quick things, though. I must encourage or give you a little plug for the London Mathematical Society, who have sponsored today. If you're not a member of the LMS, I would encourage you to think about joining. There's something in your pack telling you how to become a member, and that way you get, as well, a lot of the information about good practice scheme comes in our newsletter, the LMS newsletter, which comes out monthly. Also, you get more awareness of events like today, so do think about joining. I've been a member since, well, probably I shouldn't say, quite a long time, and I find it incredibly useful as a networking thing, as finding out what's going on around the UK and the maths scene. Just a very useful membership to have. It's not that expensive, particularly for students. Was there anything else I was going to say? Sign up for the discussion groups, yes. So perhaps somebody will say that anyway, but we're after this session, we're having a cup of tea. Is that right? Yes. There's a talk on funding, and then there are some discussion groups. And I must say, I hope you find Women in Maths Day useful. I certainly have found it very useful over the years that I've been coming to them. Partly because you get to hear some interesting mathematics, which is obviously really important, but also because it's a real opportunity to get to the critical mass of mainly women mathematicians. I mean, it's not a very usual thing to see a large room full of female mathematicians, and there are things that we have in common, and questions that you might have that other people know the answer to. So I do encourage you to think about going to one of the discussion sessions, and there are sign-up sheets on the front desk for the various different topics. And they're running again tomorrow in case you want to go to 2 of them. You can go one today and one tomorrow. Right, yes. Oh, and vote for your poster. That's awesome. Have a look at the poster. It's over Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to take questions. Yeah.
As Kathy said, there will be one of the discussion groups is on the good practice scheme and what it's doing for departments. But Kathy will take a few questions before tea if anyone has any specific things they'd like to ask now.
Hi. Hi. It's probably a rather trivial question, but for the London Mathematical Society, I noticed on the form that you need a nominator and a seconder.
Yes.
I certainly work in isolation. If people approach you during the events here, would you be happy to?
Absolutely, yeah. Those of us who are LMS members, I've said there's quite a few around here. Anyone want to raise their hand if you're an LMS member? Right. There's a few of us. So yes, please do ask, and you can get a nomination and a seconder from any of us. Yeah.
Okay, something that maybe we should mention about the benchmarking scheme is that if your department did not fill in a benchmarking survey,
Yes.
do you want to carry on with that?
Yes. If your department did not fill in the benchmarking survey, you can still do it. The survey is 90 questions or something. It's in the back of the documentation on good practice. If you could take that back to your head department and say, have we done this survey? Where's our report? That would be quite interesting to do because your head department, if they've done it, will have this report. They'll have received it last week, so it should be fresh in their mind, hopefully. If they haven't, can still do it, and we are looking at getting that data and then doing rerunning the comparative analysis against other departments, so you get your own report again. That's something we want to carry on doing as other departments get engaged with it.
And that's particularly aimed, if your department's thinking of going for Athena, it's an excellent way of getting that benchmarking, which otherwise is quite difficult.
Absolutely, yeah.
To set up.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll just thank Kathy and ask any questions you like about the rest of the meeting.